Thank you guys. Welcome everyone to our webinar about educational branding. And it's called Go Brand Yourself. Again, it's an educator panel, and I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves so you can see who will be speaking to you about branding yourself. So this is our educational panel. I'm hoping that you can see, can you guys see the entire screen, or do you see my little videos?
I see the entire screen.
Beautiful. Okay, so we'll just start with Tinashe, and we will go, or Tinashe, and we will go and let you guys introduce yourselves.
All right, so I am Tinashe Blanchet, and I'm a former high school math teacher. I taught high school math for about 10 years before I became a full-time trainer and consultant. And so now I travel around the U.S. and I train teachers, particularly on how to use G Suite and with a focus on secondary mathematics. Also run a nonprofit in New Orleans called the Learning Laboratory, where we offer high-quality, low-cost programs for students and teachers.
Sarah.
All right, hey, how you doing, Desiree? Okay, good. All right, hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Thomas, and it is my 14th year in education. I'm currently a regional tech coordinator in a large district in Maryland. I've taught every grade from first through 12th and master's in ed tech, so it's crazy, been all over the map. But also I am the founder and CEO of a grassroots organization called EduMatch, and from there we have different branches. So EduMatch is like the umbrella. We also have EduMatch Publishing. We have EduMatch nonprofit, which is starting up, so that's EduMatch Foundation Incorporated, and we also have some other really cool things coming down the pike, so stay tuned.
Santi?
Hi, everybody. It's just going to be my audio. Sorry, you won't be able to see me. If you Google my name, I'm definitely the only Santi Khairassame in the world. But I started a company called Project Recess based in New York City, and I partner with public schools and train teachers and administrators on how to use specific technology tools, mainly G Suite for Education. So I've been doing that work for about 10 years. I've been running my own company for about 7 years, and very happy to be here. Desiree, thank you again for organizing this.
No problem. And I know Taneesha will be joining us. I saw a picture pop up and then go away, so I think she is having a little technical difficulties, but she will be joining us. And my name is Desiree Alexander. I am the founder CEO of Educator Alexander Consulting, and this is my, I think, 19th year in education. I have been an English teacher, a librarian, all middle and high school. Loved what I did. Became a technology supervisor in a large school district, and now I work for a nonprofit called APEL in Louisiana, and I run my own consulting business. So each and every one of us, I have worked with all of these amazing people on the panel, and I have to say I feel pretty honored that they all answered my call and answered my beg to come and be on this panel. You have some amazing people that will be giving you advice today about how to brand, and we're going to go ahead and jump right in with the first question. So question one is, how can branding benefit educators?
Okay, I guess I'll jump in. Get the party started. So branding, I feel like it's something that when we're intentional about, then it is definitely beneficial. I went to a great session back in 2013 with Joe Sanfilippo and Tony Sinancis talking about branding, because I had never really considered it. But their tagline was "Tell your story, or someone will tell it for you." So every time I bring up the term branding, then it's kind of mixed feelings among the educational community. However, I personally feel that branding and reputation are very synonymous. So either you take control of your brand, or your brand is going to take control of you. So, so definitely, put that story out there, show the positive things, because I mean, we can all learn from one another, and that helps us all to grow. So sharing the good, sharing things that you learned, that benefits the whole profession. So that would be my take.
I'll jump in. I can say that as a teacher, branding was a game changer for me. I remember when I was in the classroom and I was doing all these great things with my students, and I just felt like, for a number of reasons, I was never being recognized. And not that I wanted necessarily like any accolades or anything like that, but just kind of having, some awareness around what's happening in my classroom. And so when I started my blog, and I think I started my blog back in 2011, it was just a way to document everything that was happening in my classroom. Now, when I started that blog, I didn't think anything of it, right? It was just a way to say, okay, hey, we did this activity on this day. But that blog put me in a position where when people were online looking for someone who could do training, my blog came up. That's actually how I was able to make the transition from being a teacher to a trainer. And I was doing training in my district, but a company was Googling using iPads in the math classroom, and my blog came up. And so that opened a door for me. And so when you work on your personal brand, what'll happen is that it'll open up doors for you. It'll create opportunities that wouldn't otherwise be there because there's no awareness around what your talents are. Something that I've been saying a lot is that if you don't know what you have to offer, then you can't sell it. And so I think that as teachers, we're humble. We don't want to come off as being like braggy. So we don't think that it's okay for us to say, hey, this is what I have to offer. But when you walk into a job interview, that's what people are looking for. They want to know, what is it that sets you apart? And so when you establish a personal brand, then that's something that immediately people know, okay, this is what this person has to offer.
Right. This is great. We got pearls of wisdom right from the gate here. And just to build off that, so we're living in an age of just information overload, right? There are so many teachers that have wonderful things to put forward. So this idea of branding, I think, speaks to this idea of filtering, right? So when people are looking for specific information nowadays, it's like we have a plethora of information, but how can we filter it to find sort of that news and that content that's specific to me? And I think that's where brand comes in. It helps you, again, stand out, as what people are saying, and sort of filters and separates you from, and differentiates you, I should say, from the other people in the crowd.
And I'll jump in last. I think that a benefit to educators, kind of piggybacking on what all of you amazingly said, is that it's taking control of your own message. As educators, we have so many people telling us what we do and telling us our worth and telling us through different avenues, what we contribute to our profession in the world. And when you brand yourself, you're actually taking control of your own message. You're saying, no, this is what I have to offer. This is what I do. This is what I'm passionate about. And I think that's how it benefits educators, because we can now put our own message out there in a positive way. And we can say, well, no, this is what my worth is. This is what I contribute. And you have control over what you put out there. So I think it's a very big benefit. And I think what Tinashe brought out is very important, because when I talk about branding all over the nation, one of the things I hear is, I don't want to brag on myself. I don't want to just constantly talk about myself. I don't want to, I don't want to be that person where, people are talking about their cats and I walk up and start talking about my company and talking about how awesome I am. And I think it's a misconception about branding. It's not bragging on yourself. It's not being, completely selfish and things like that. It's really just controlling your own message and controlling what's out there. So I think that is the big benefit for branding. Does anyone want to say anything else about the benefits before we move on? Question 2, how can an educator begin to brand themselves? I feel that if they're watching this session and they're interacting on Twitter, and we do have Twitter questions going out and things like that too, so definitely hop on Twitter and communicate. They're interested in beginning. Like, where do I start? How do I begin? This seems so hard. how can they begin to brand themselves?
Okay, I'll jump in here. As I said earlier, for me, my brand started with my blog. It started with Blanchet blog. And so I would say the place to start, and it doesn't have to be a full-blown blog because I get that a blog can be a big commitment, even if it's just like social media, if it's just a Twitter, if it's an Instagram. I think that the way you start to brand yourself is by publishing what you do. Right. So whatever is going on in your classroom, whatever is going on with you professionally, if you're attending professional events, start tweeting that out. Right. And so one thing that I've learned is that sometimes with branding, we get caught up in aesthetics. Right. It's like, ooh, I'm going to design a new website. Ooh, I'm going to make a logo. Ooh, I'm going to make everything pretty. But the truth is that what's going to make you stand out is not your logo. It's going to be your content. It's going to be the substantive things that you bring to the table. And so just by sharing out the things that you're doing, right, you'll start to generate a following. And even if it's just a following amongst, people locally, right, people are going to start to want to know, okay, what is he or she doing next?
I think that's fantastic. In addition to that, I would add, even before you start putting stuff out there, sit down and really examine the work that you're doing and think about what is it that you're passionate about, what is it that makes you unique, because once you begin to identify those elements within yourself, then you can start really focusing on your brand and, again, find out what's unique to you and how you can stand out. So yeah, you can sit down, and you don't even need a computer for this. I love old school analog paper, right? You can write down the things that you're passionate about, the things that you want to share, and also see what's out there, who's out there that's doing something similar, and perhaps how can you differentiate yourself from those other educators.
Yeah, great tips that were already shared. Just wanted to kind of jump in to the conversation. So definitely what Tinashe was saying about starting with the blog and starting with social media, I believe in that too. The lowest barrier to entry, then go ahead and do it. Like just be like Nike, just do it, just get in there, right? And then from there you can tweak and refine and do whatever you need to do. So I definitely wanted to second that. And also try to align with people. I like what Santi was saying about finding people who are doing the same thing as you are, and see where there's room to collaborate also, and and work together. And I would say ultimately, the one thing to keep in mind is to add value, give value to people. And I think that would take you very, very far.
Every time I try to unmute, there's 50 boxes that pop up. So I'm every time. Okay. I completely agree with everything you guys are saying. I think to begin is scary, but I think to begin anything is scary. Anything that's worth anything. So I think I'm really to piggyback on what all of you completely awesomely said, is to first find out what you want to brand about, because that's going to make every difference in the world. If you're not passionate about what you're branding, it's not going to work. And that's one of the main reasons why brands fail, is because you're not passionate about it. You just wanted to brand for, I tell people, if you're branding to make extra money, then you can go work at Barnes and Noble for that. It's just not going to work. So you really need to brand about something that you're passionate about. You really need to brand with something that you want to be with forever, and that you want your name to be associated with, and that you want to put out in the world and add that value, like Sarah was saying, out into the world. To start branding, I do have a resource on my website, and that's educatoralexander.com/branding. And just like what Santi was saying, they are nice little handouts that can start with the questions that you want to think about when you start. And I always start with, what are you passionate about? And I tell people that your passion is not like when you were little and we're I'm passionate about everything. No. What if I gave you $1 million today, what would you not stop doing? That's a passion. So I know, like, if you gave me $1 million today, I'm still working on Educator Alexander. You know, like, I'll probably hire a secretary, but I'm working on, you know, like, I'm still working on Educator Alex. So that's when you know that that is your passion. So when you talk about branding yourself, that's what you need to start is, what is my passion? What do I really want to work on and deal with? Does anyone else want to contribute anything to this question before we move on? And I do want to say that if you are live and watching this, we do have the Zoom webinar chat. So if you want to chat in the chat box, I'm going to put that link in there, the educatoralexander.com/branding, where you can get those handouts to help you get started. All right, panel. Next question. Once I'm branded, because some of our audience have already started tinkering with branding themselves and getting social media and things like that, how can they further their brand? How can they go a little bit further with what they're doing?
So something that I've seen, something that I've done also, it's this idea of proactivity, right? So yes, continuing to blog out there and tweet, continue to make connections. I think there's a huge power in what Sarah was saying, just do it, just go out there and just put content out. At the same time, and I know this was mentioned before, I think people are visual. And so if you do have some sort of logo, some sort of color set, or even your name, if it's something that's easy to remember, I think that can really help with a brand. If we're looking at brands in general, right? Like you see the apple, you know, that represents the computer. You see, you know, Coca-Cola has a very, you know, identifiable brand. So I believe we can take those aspects and really apply to the work that we're doing also. You know, when I hear Educator Alexander, right away, Desiree, you know, so thinking about, you know, like going to a website such as Fiverr, right? Maybe even outsourcing somebody to make a logo for you. You don't have to do everything yourself. There are a lot of resources where you don't have to spend a lot of money, and you can work with some really talented people to help you create something that is a visual representation of the things that you do.
Yeah, I'll definitely piggyback off of what Santi was just saying. Absolutely. And going along with that theme with the connecting with folks, then getting a community behind you, I think is also very powerful. Like other people who believe in the same thing, and just, you know, just growing together. To me, that's been like the biggest game changer in my entire career. Like the whole 14-year span, it was when I found my community, and, you know, just found like that group to lock in with, and it made such a difference. In addition, there's like one principle that I just want to throw out. I read about it in a 4-hour work week. It was called MVP, minimum viable product. And pretty much what that is just like trying different things, because you always want to pivot. You always want to change with the times and give people what they need. So definitely, just throwing little things out there and iterating, you know, making them better based on feedback, making them better based on suggestions, things of that nature. And I feel like I'm throwing a lot of jargon out there, but one other principle that I would like to throw out is the 80-20 rule. So I've heard this said a lot of different times, a lot of different ways, but the one that kind of is applicable to today's conversation is that you will get 80% of your results from 20% of your efforts. So out of the 100% of things that you try, then maybe only 20% of them will stick, you know? And, you know, 80% might not yield anything whatsoever. So you have to be okay with that. Then not everything is going to work, and know when to just cut your losses if it doesn't align with your brand, or if it's not sustainable, or if it's something that you're just not passionate about doing. I mean, we have a limited resource that is time. So you have to figure out what is worth your time and what is not. So definitely those would be my steps.
I wanted to jump in and kind of piggyback on what Santi said, and Sarah touched on it as well, is the idea of getting help. I think, and something that I think all of you have heard me say is you got to pay the cost to be the boss. And a lot of times as educators, I know anytime I train teachers, if I show them a tool, the first question is it free? Is it free? Do I have to pay for it? Right? And I understand that. I love a free tool, right? But at the end of the day, you know, you have to be willing to invest in yourself. You have to be willing to invest in your brand. And so for me, what was a game changer in terms of my business is when I hired an assistant. And, you know, I know Desiree's shaking her head because I'm like, girl, you got to get you an assistant, because it makes such a difference, particularly if you're traveling and you're training teachers. And for me, I was losing business because I was unable to manage the leads that were coming in. And so by bringing on an assistant, it really made a difference, because when people reach out to you, they want to be able to talk to someone, right? It's like if you call a company, you don't want to be having to leave a voicemail. You want to be able to talk to someone and get immediate attention. So as you start to, you know, level up, you're going to find that you're going to have to invest, whether it's in, you know, someone to help you in the work that you do. Is it someone to design your website? Like, I used WordPress for a really long time because it was free. And then I started using Squarespace and I was like, oh snap, this is really nice. And I have to pay for it. But again, there's a difference in what you're going to get for free versus what you get when you're willing to pay even a small amount.
Yeah, that is so true. I definitely second what Tinashe was saying. And one thing that I just wanted to chime in, I forgot to say, a good friend of mine, Dr. Will D'Amport, he created a documentary that he put out through EduMatch called The Edupreneur. And in that, he has 8 edupreneurs kind of sharing their tips. So I just wanted to throw that out as a resource for anyone who wanted to take a look and see also what some other folks are doing as well.
Yeah, I love where this conversation is going. And I also just want to reiterate what Tinashe was saying, this idea of delegation, right? And these are good problems to have, where you have so much work to do that you need to, you know, bring in more people. And for me, and I know other entrepreneurs also, it's like you want to do everything yourself, but then you'll quickly realize you do that, then that's going to hurt you in the long run. You can't, right? So you need to bring in more people. So yeah, I love this idea of being open to bringing in help and yes, spending a little money for it, because you will get a good return for that. So I just want to underscore like that. I love these
So I actually want to ask a follow-up question instead of adding more to this conversation. I want to kind of keep this going and merge question 2 and 3. So when we're talking about getting started and furthering our brand, can you talk about maybe some obstacles that have come up in your road to creating that brand before we get to our question 4, which I think is a very important question. Question 4, so I'm teasing question 4 because it's a really helpful one. But before we get to that, what obstacles have you hit and how did you overcome them?
I'll begin. So a big obstacle for me. So I'm going to begin it by saying I think social media can be a huge game changer in developing your brand and reaching a lot of people. Me personally, I struggle with social media because I just don't like using it. Like I have a hard time tweeting. I have a hard time blogging. Like my specific personality, I like being out there and talking to people like one-on-one. And so like I struggle with the social media thing, and I still do. So that's been a huge challenge. But to sort of like, so I sat down and I wrestled with that. And, you know, again, I thought about what are my strengths, and my strengths are talking to people in person. So part of my brand, you know, for better or for worse, it's people knowing me within the New York space, right? And then doing work, hosting events, and then slowly like just trying to get on that social media thing and trying to expand it out. But that's been a challenge of mine, and I've just been sort of focusing on my strengths to try to level that out.
Yeah, I guess for me, spoiler alert, number 4 is gonna hit on it. So I'm not gonna spoil question 4 just yet, but I'll speak to. Other than that, I would say wanting to do all of the things all of the time, like, you know, always wanting to jump on, you know, Twitter chats, and my personal life was starting to take a hit, you know, because I was putting all of my time and all of my energy into this because it was something that I was so excited about. But yeah, so finding that balance has been kind of difficult. So that would be my secondary answer to this follow-up question.
I think for me, one thing that I've kind of struggled with ever since I really started doing things on my own and really branding myself is finding a balance between branding myself, but at the same time serving all the different organizations that I work with. I think that, you know, for the teachers in our audience, for people who are still working in schools and districts, you know, sometimes you feel conflicted about whether it's okay for you to brand yourself as an individual, knowing that, you know, the expectation is that you're representing for the organization that you work for. And when you get to the point as an independent consultant where you're working with multiple organizations and multiple companies, right, then there's always a different, depending on what company you're working for, companies have different expectations around how much they want you to sell yourself and how much they want you to sell that company. And so I think that one thing that's really important is for you to always be transparent with whoever you're working with about what you expect and make sure that you're clear on what their expectations are as well, because I've seen where other people in this space have burned bridges, right? Because they were branding themselves in an environment where that was not the expectation, right? And so it's going to be really important as your brand grows that you also are willing to let go of some relationships, or willing to say, you know what, I choose myself. Right. And I think that that's a really challenging thing for us to do, because as teachers, again, that's not what that's not what we're really about. We're about the kids, we're about the school, we're about the organization. And how do you maintain your autonomy, you know, in that kind of environment? So I think that that's an ongoing struggle for all of us.
Yeah, and if I could jump in, you just made a great point, Tinashe, that I had thought about when you first asked the question, but I forgot to mention it. So definitely navigating like this field, because there's so many companies, so many organizations, so many different, you know, players in the game to navigate. So I know that one thing that I'm extremely conscious of is any kind of potential conflicts of interest that might arise. Still working with the district. So I'm very methodical about not bringing my own stuff in, because I've heard stories of just where that's gone horribly wrong. So that's always been one thing. And I mean, that starts to get really funny when you're working with like contracting with this organization that might, you know, be doing business with blah, 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 blah. So, I mean, all of those things, to keep that on the horizon, it's a lot to think about.
And I agree with what all of you have said. I've dealt with pretty much everything that you guys are talking about. I think another level of it is being in the ed tech space, even though I do more than just ed tech, but being in the ed tech space as a Black female, I've come across some different issues, just with number one, being a female in this space, that you know, most of it is run by males, and just people questioning your authority, people questioning your knowledge without actually questioning it, without actually coming out and saying it. But, you know, the little comments and the little, and the surprise face when you walk up, it's like, yeah, that's me. Santi just put in the chat the microaggressions. So, you know, all those little things. And then being a Black female on top of that, sometimes it's hard to get a foot in the door. Sometimes it's hard to get a seat at the table. So that kind of thing. So I think that was some and still are some issues that are in this space. All right, so yeah, so Sarah put in the chat, we can have an hour-long conversation just about that. It's so true. Any other conversations about question 3 before we move on to question 4? I know people are dying for question 4 because I teased it like 30 minutes ago, and they're like, where's question 4? So we're gonna move on to question 4. I will just say that Taneesha is still trying to come in. She's having some technical, so if you see me looking down, I'm trying to text with her and email her. She's still trying to come on. She's just having some technical difficulties. So, question 4. And if you're in the chat, make sure that if you want to talk to everybody, that you're talking to panelists and attendees. So, question 4. There are so many people out there doing the same thing that you want to do. And let's be honest, there's not that many original thoughts in the world, right? There's just not. So we're all going to be doing pretty much the same thing, but just in our own way. So why me? Why should I brand? I already see Sarah's out there, and Tinashe's out there, and Santi's out there, and Desiree's out there, and all these other people are out there. Why me when I want to teach ed tech too? Or why me when I want to talk about classroom management too? And I put imposter syndrome to kind of lead our conversation and talk about the imposter syndrome while we're talking about this question.
I've already unmuted because I struggled with this so hard when I first started. I can remember like really feeling physically ill when I started my nonprofit because things were just coming together so quickly. And it was just like, why, why me? You know, and I think that when you start to realize that you're moving towards what you're supposed to be doing, it can be a very overwhelming feeling because now you have all this pressure to be successful. And so if I could say one thing to someone who's feeling like an imposter and why me, I guess my answer to that would be why not you, right? Why shouldn't it be you? And while you may not be offering a unique idea, you're offering a unique perspective on that idea. And, you know, understanding that when I know as a presenter, you know, I present a topic that a lot of people present, but nobody presents it like I do. Right. And so when people come back to your sessions, they're coming back not for the content, they're coming back for you. Right. I had this lady tell me that she would watch me. What did she say? I think she said that she would watch me I don't know, like fold a paper bag or something random. And it was just the idea of once you make a connection, once you make a personal connection with someone, then it's not really about the content anymore. And that's what we really want to be clear about, is that your personal brand is about you. It's not necessarily just content based, right? And it's the same thing as educators. We know that. We know that we don't teach content, we teach kids. And so if we apply that same concept to the work that we do, then we understand that people are just looking to connect with us and our unique perspective. So, you know, I would just say everyone feels like this. Everybody has that imposter syndrome, and it's okay to feel like that, but it's not okay to allow that to dictate how you're going to move professionally, right? And the last thing that I'll say, I think I saw this, like I'm a big Oprah girl, and I remember seeing on Oprah, I think it was Brene Brown, who talked about fear. Because that's really all that imposter syndrome is just fear. And it's okay for fear to be with you, right? But fear is not in the driver's seat, right? So what I say is that, you know, fear, we're going to put, it's like the kid who's like, I don't know, Mom, I don't know if we can do this. And it's like, it's okay, baby. You go sit in the back seat and be quiet so that Mom can drive, right? And so that's what you got to do with that fear. You got to put it in its place and don't put it in the driver's seat and say, I'm going to allow fear to dictate how I move professionally.
Wow. I love Tinashe. That was fantastic. Yep, I feel like snapping as well. Yeah, so definitely a lot of things that you said were things that I'll touch on as well. So one of the things was about the intersectionality, right? Because we're all individuals, right? And there's a different set of circumstances that come together to make us who we are. So nobody's going to see a topic or see, you know, a skill set or see whatever the same way we do through our own filter, by nature of us being who we are, having the experiences that we have, growing up the way that we did, you know, with our identity. So everyone's going to have a different spin, and maybe it's going to take someone that looks or grew up or you know, or what have you, like whoever's delivering the message for it to sync. Because I've heard I heard a statistic, so don't quote me on it because I don't even know where it came from, but I promise y'all I did not make this up. So I heard that it takes 6 exposures for something to actually sink in. So, and I've also heard another statistic saying that it takes like 17 exposures. So I don't know which one is right, but I know that a lot of times the message will be received. The message is received by some folks from someone else who speaks their language, so to speak, right? So definitely, that would be a case for why each person should tell his or her own story, because nobody else is going to tell it the same way as you. Another thing about about why there's so many people, and this is kind of going back to what you were saying in a follow-up question, and a lot of times society will push back on us as a Black woman, or as any part of any group that has historically been trying to been silenced, then there is that shutdown. So society might push back, but we need to push through. We need to push through against the pushback. So that's another reason why should you say it? Because if your voice traditionally has not been heard, and I'm not saying the voice of Sarah J. Thomas, but I'm saying the voice of anyone like me has traditionally not been heard or amplified at the same rate as anyone else, then it's imperative for me to tell my story, to get it out there and get it heard. And the last point I wanted to make, which is really piggybacking off of what Tinashe said. Yesterday I was listening to a podcast, and I can't remember the lady's name, but she was talking about how important it is to be comfortable with having. And I love that phrase, because she said that a lot of times people will self-sabotage because part of their identity is, I'm just X, Y, and Z. And when they get that success, then they will self-sabotage because they feel like they don't deserve it. So there's a need for all of us to be comfortable with having, like when it comes into our lives. She was saying, like, she had to get comfortable with the idea of having $1 million sitting in her bank account without having to spend it or having to give it away. She just had to be comfortable with that money just sitting there. And that resonated with me. I don't have $1 million in the bank, but still. That being said, whatever X amount of whatever, or even, it doesn't even have to be money or anything tangible. It could just be the success. Okay, so we just did this event. It went great. Cool. So bask in that, sit in that, enjoy it, be in the moment instead of just running off looking for the next thing. So that was my takeaway from that podcast. And yeah, so that's it.
I really wish my video worked, because there's some really strong head nods coming from my side of the screen. I think people have been saying some amazing things here. And yeah, I just want to recognize, like most of the edtech space, it's run by men, and typically not men of color. So I just want to just shout out just the composition of this talk right here. I think it's a beautiful thing. And when it comes to this idea of why me, for me, I think about my previous life in the arts, and I did a lot of photography, and I did a lot of black and white photography where you got to work like an hour, 2 hours to get one really good print. And what that taught me is that everything has beauty in it. You just have to frame it in a particular way. And it could be anything. It could be like a stone on the street. It could be beautiful. And I think that's for me, it was a nice sort of representation of us and our stories. As people have said before, we all have a very unique way of sharing something. And when you make that connection, yes, that is part of your brand. So why you? Because you're enough. And I feel like that's something that I've been telling myself a lot lately, because I also deal with imposter syndrome, and this idea that, yes, you are enough, you have things to share.
And we have Taneesha on now. So hello and welcome, Taneesha.
Good morning,
her name
everyone.
is Desiree Alexander on the little thing. Oh, now it's Taneesha. But I think we still have a Desiree Alexander up there, but we have Taneesha here now. So Taneesha, would you like to jump in? First of all, please let us know who you are, what you do, and then you can jump in on this question of why me.
So my name is Taneesha Thomas. I'm an instructional technologist. I work in River Forest School District, and I also work for myself at fluttertech.org. So what was the next one? For me, I looked at, you know, that question at one point in time. But for me, I don't feel like a why me. I'm like, why not me? You know, I have something to share. I have an excitement, a fire for what I do. And I think that people would benefit from it. And just being out there with other people is so rewarding. I learned from so many people that are out there.
Uh-oh.
It's like, it's not a, yeah, that's kind of where I stand with that.
Okay. So,
You guys get me?
I think you're freezing just a little bit, unless it's just on my end. Okay, so I think you're freezing just a little bit, Taneesha.
Okay, let me adjust some things.
Okay, and you can mute while we're moving on. So,
okay.
Thank you. Okay, so first I want to piggyback on what some of you said. That first of all, what is the imposter syndrome? And that's when you start feeling like I'm an imposter. Why should people listen to me? You know, who am I to contribute to this conversation? And I can't even say enough of what everyone else said and how, I mean, everything that they said were true, and they're coming from their own situation with it. I know for me, you know, I've always been confident. I know that I know what I know. I know that I know what I don't know. And I know that I want to learn and things like that. But you still get that fear, like Tinashe was saying, creeping in of, you know, why me? Why am I going out on this stage and not someone else? Why would they listen to me? I'm just, and then fill in the blank. And I hate that word, just. And I hear people say, I'm just a teacher, I'm just a para. I'm like, why? Why are we diminishing ourselves by saying just? So I hate that word. That word is a component of fear. Saying just is the fear of being myself and of saying that I'm awesome, right? You're awesome. That's why you and not the next person. But I think that feeling of why me gets caught up in everybody. I don't care how awesome they are, how many degrees they have, how many speaking engagements they have. I think pretty much everybody has that little why me question. So I want you to remember that, and remember that everyone on this panel, everyone that you see that you look up to, everybody that you see that you admire, they all started from day one, each and every one of us. And we forget that because we see big names and we're like, ooh, so-and-so. We all started from day one. We all started exactly where you are right now. And we worked our butts off to get where we are, where we are now. And continuing with question 3 and 4, I know one of my big drawbacks is kind of what I think Tinashe and Sarah mentioned, is that work-life balance. I still haven't gotten to that yet. I'm still working every single minute on something, and it's not cute, and it's not, I tell people when you're like, oh, I don't have any time, and people use that to brag, but I feel like if you're using that to brag, you're young. Because when you get older, you realize that that's not a cute way to live. That's not cute. It's not, you should have some work-life balance. You should be able to chill out. And I think that's one of the things when you first start your brand that you're going to have a problem with, that you're going to have a struggle with, is keeping that work-life balance. So I'm going to stop right there and have some people chime in.
I want to jump in because something else that came to mind when it comes to this idea of imposter syndrome is scarcity-based thinking. I feel like a lot of people embrace scarcity-based thinking, and particularly if we go back to this idea of us being presenters of color in a space where we're really underrepresented. That scarcity thinking is not just arbitrary, right? It's usually true that there's only room for one of us, right? And so we have to be clear that, you know, we need to be clear and intentional in rejecting scarcity, right? That when I see another Black woman in a space where, you know, I was that girl, that I'm gonna say, hey girl, right? And not, hey girl. Right? So we want to be careful about how we think about these situations, and really embracing abundance and understanding that there's enough room for all of us, right? And so I think that that's also another, you know, element in that imposter syndrome, is when we believe that there's only room for one or two, and you know, am I really the one?
Yes, I agree 100% with what you just said, Tinashe. You just like ignited something in me. I feel that all of that being said, we need to push back on organizations that tend to take a checklist approach to diversity. Like, oh, okay, you know, we need, you know, a person of color. Check, we got it. Let's move on. No, we need to push back on that kind of model. So I think that also ties in with this branding discussion, because that's one way that we can use our brand in doing that. And I know that.
And this is why we need our own organizations and institutions, so that we don't have to be somebody else's token. I'm muting.
Exactly. So I agree 100%. And I know that I'm committed to be more intentional about doing this. So that's just one thing I wanted to jump in and say.
And I want to say, when we're talking about not being somebody else's token, we're talking about every single race, every single gender, every single sexual orientation. You know, even if you're a white male, depending on your views and your where you're coming from and your situation, same difference. You know, you don't want to make yourself the liberal token or the whatever. So when we're saying this, we're talking to everybody. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, and I think just to add to this idea of like microaggressions and things that make it even harder, I sort of equate this to like the movie industry, right? There are a lot of terrible movies that star, you know, white people, but then when, let's say, Black Panther, people are like, oh, this has to work well or else it's a big failure. And it's like, well, why is that added pressure added to this movie? You know, because like this movie is supposed to represent all Black people? Like, no. And it's the same thing with like the work we do. Like, yes, we should not like deal with that much scrutiny, but we do, unfortunately. But at the same time, I love that Sarah's pointing out this idea of collaboration, and we need to support each other. So I think that helps with it also.
And I'll just piggyback on the discussion we're having now, and using your brand for that. Like Sarah, you know, said that when you create a brand, just understand that it is using your voice, and it's giving you power to be able to stand up. Even if you don't have a brand, you have the power and the voice to do that, you know, to stand up and go, well, no, this is not okay. Whether it's about you, whether it's about your situation or about the person that's standing next to me, having that voice to say, this is not okay, and I'm not going to just be silent and work for this company or consult with this company or whatever, and I see that you're doing dirty things. It's not okay. And using your brand to not call them out in a way of, you know, calling them out directly. You may do that too, but, you know, just to say, hey, it's not okay, and I'm not going to have myself or my brand stand for this. So does anyone want to say anything else before we move on? All right, so question 5. So what are some of the tools and skills that helped you brand yourself?
All right, I'll say for me, this is more so a trick. Whenever I am feeling that imposter syndrome come on or anything to that nature. So And it probably sounds kind of silly, but all right, I'm about to spoil a 20-year-old movie. If anyone has not seen Fight Club, then you might want to put your ears.
Spoiler alert.
Right, hashtag spoiler alert. But you have Brad Pitt, you know, who's obviously Brad Pitt, right? And then you have like the narrator in this. And so the narrator is looking up to Brad Pitt's character, who's so cool and doing all the stuff that the narrator wishes that he could do. You know, he wishes that he could be like as cool as Brad Pitt, whatever his name is in the movie, Tyler or something like that. So anyway, the spoiler alert is Tyler Durden. Thank you. Yes.
Edward Norton is the actor.
Yes, Edward Norton is the narrator in that movie. Yes, 100%. So Edward Norton, the twist at the end is that they are both the same person. They're like a split personality, right? So you have, so they're both the same side of the same coin. So what I do is I kind of apply this thinking to my life at one point, and I was just like, okay, well, you know, I could go out here and give this keynote the way Sarah would give it, all nervous and trembling and everyone's going to see me shaking, or I can go out here and give this the way Sarah the teacher would give it, and you know, and it's going to be bomb, it's going to be fire, whatever. So I'm gonna be like Sarah the teacher, and even if I fall short, then that's a whole lot better than I would have done if I didn't hype myself up in my mind. So that's kind of like my one trick that I use.
I'm going to jump in here. So specific tools that you can use. I'm going to say right now, my favorite thing is Creative Market. It's a website where you can go and buy professionally designed templates, creativemarket.com. Right now, I'm really into helping people with their resumes. And as someone who's independent, I'm not really doing a lot of resumes, but what I've done is I've used a resume template from my one-sheeter, and something that has helped me generate a lot more leads, even as an ed tech person, is to give a printed one-sheeter to every attendee at one of my seminars. So I will usually give them one of those one-sheeters, and it's basically like a resume that has my picture on it, and I list, instead of the jobs that I've had, I list the topics that I can speak on, okay? And so one thing, as ed tech people, I think that a lot of times we want to do everything electronically, but what I found is that when you put something in someone's hand, that's something that they may stumble across later, right? Like, it's unlikely that they're going to stumble across your website. They have to actually do that. So I would think in general, what you want to be thinking of is, what can you do to where they will passively stumble across your content again? Does that make sense? So you could give them something in print. You could collect their contact information so that you can follow up with them. So another one would be MailChimp, you know, to set up a MailChimp where you're sending out a newsletter. This is something I do for my nonprofit that I want to do for my personal consulting business. So I would say overall, the idea is to consider how you can be reaching out in ways that are more proactive. And I know we've used that word before, to be proactive as opposed to reactive.
That's great. And I'm just going to jump in and say, something that helps me is looking at other industries and seeing how people brand themselves there. So for example, I mean, this whole idea of branding is for marketing, right? And we're taking those tools and we're applying it to education. So what else can we do? So I love looking at, you know, just the field of technology and business in general and seeing what's trending there. Because if something is very popular, that's going to eventually make its way to education. And you want to be on the forefront of that. You want to be anticipating that. You don't want to react to that. So look at other fields besides education. They could be completely different, and see what's working there and how can we apply those ideas to our field. And second, this idea of conferences. Like I love going to conferences with the idea of networking in person, right? And it goes back to this idea of you'll never forget how someone made you feel, right? Like we all get 1,000 emails, we all get 1,000 business cards, but when you make that personal connection, you know, like you can build your brand also in an in-person way. So I think conferences are an amazing place to network and visit people. So shout out to people who are going to ISTE.
Okay, So we are going to wrap this up with our final question, and then I'm going to make sure that everyone has the contact information. This says question 4 up here, just ignore that. Imagine that that is a 6. But we're going to wrap it up with this last question, and then I'm gonna make sure that everyone has everyone on the panel's contact information. But the last question, like 1 minute spin-off or 30-second spin-off, give your one best practice tip, whether that's a website, whether that's a believe in yourself, whatever. One last practice tip from everyone on the panel.
All right, I will go back to seek to add value first. Like keep that at the core of everything you do, and you'll be good.
I say be proactive, you know, go out and yes, make those connections. And also like look at the business side also of your brand. Make sure you have an LLC set up if that's something you want to do. Make sure you have a good accountant. Oh my God, a great accountant can help you leaps and bounds, especially if you're doing all of this work as a consultant. So make sure you have your business stuff in order. And all those resources are online. Also, if you do a quick Google search.
I would say share even if no one's watching. I think that it's really important that if you're going to be online, and remember I said that was where I would start is with a blog or a Twitter or something like that. But keep in mind that when you first get started, nobody may be paying attention, but you're still building a body of work. So continue to build that body of work even if you don't have 1,000 followers. That will come later, but it'll never come if you stop because no one's watching.
Taneesha, did you want to chime in?
I'm going to try. Can you guys hear me? Okay. I would say is look for the best examples and follow them. You know, when you're out there, you see some amazing people, you meet amazing people, talk to them, get feedback, and use it. That's been helpful for me.
Thank you, panel. And I would say mine is definitely, since we kind of already done like the inspirational path, is just use those websites that are already out there to help you get started. Santi mentioned Fiverr.com, Tinashe mentioned Creative Market. There's so many websites out there that you can use to help you start creating your brand. So you don't have to do this all by yourself. Also reach out to people that are already in the business and start asking them for help. You don't have to do this all on your own. You have, you know, what, 5 amazing people right here that you can reach out to. So reach out and ask for help. Don't be ashamed to do that. I don't know if I'm just talking about myself, but I definitely reached out for help and got, you know, advice from people. I did Facebook polls when I was like, which one of these do you like? I don't know. So, and don't be afraid to reach out for help. So with that, hopefully you've enjoyed this webinar on branding. I've seen a lot of Twitter. My Twitter is blowing up. So I think we had a very healthy conversation on Twitter. If anyone is watching this live and you have a question, you can definitely put it in the chat and we would love to answer it. And with that, this is the contact information for everyone that is on the panel. You have our Twitter handles and our email addresses. So if you have any questions, definitely reach out to us. That's what we, this is what we love to do. We love to help educators. That's why we're all in the game. So definitely reach out if you have any questions about your brand. And I am watching the chat. I was told that the video will be available and published very soon, and it will be available on the CEDUAD YouTube channel. So I wanted to announce that. So thank you guys very much for joining us today, whether you're joining us live or joining us on the, watching us on the YouTube channel. We appreciate it, and hopefully we will catch you around.
Bye.
Okay, that's fantastic. I think that was a wonderful talk. Thank you everyone for coming in. Thanks for supporting what we're doing with our Educator Monthly Meeting. There's going to be one next month dealing with connections and the value of connections, which I'll be hosting. There's people coming to join us from Australia, Croatia, Colombia, the States, and me in Scotland. So we'll have a good international mix. It'll be in the afternoon because, as you will know, that Australia's time zone is quite far ahead of mine. So I'm about 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and Australia is about 8 or 9 o'clock the next morning. So that gets you guys in the States on the East Coast about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We'd love to have you. It's on the website too we call it CEDWAD. It's easier to see than CEDUAD, CEDWAD.com. So check it out. We'd love to have you there too. I'll get the video going a week or less, and it'll be on YouTube, it'll be on Facebook, and there'll be links shared on Twitter for all that. You were wonderful. Thank you for being you. You are awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to everybody on the panel. I love you all.
Thank you for organizing this.
Desiree.
Thank y'all. And I'll be coming to you guys with other stuff. Every time I get something, I'm sharing the love. So I'll be coming to y'all.
Thank you.
Love you, girl. Thank you.